بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Now we start with lesson 41 of original Farsi book, which is about knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and different ways and methods of knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From now on, all the lessons that we are going to have is about knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it be His existence, His attributes, His actions, about divine decree and measure. All these things are about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is what our philosophers call al-ilahiyat bil-ma'na al-akhas. These are theology or theosophy in its narrower sense, because the rest is also sometimes called al-ilahiyat, all the metaphysics, all the discussions we had before. That is also sometimes called ilahiyat, but al-ilahiyat bil-ma'na al-a'am, in its broader sense. Okay. The first...
Define attributes we're doing now.
Pardon?
Define attributes?
No.
Are we doing the previous?
We are doing knowing God and different ways and methods of knowing God. So, the first thing is, for any scientific study, the first task is to clarify the subject. Conceptual clarification is very important. We say, حُسْنُ السُّؤَالِ نِصْفُ الْعِلْمِ. Good question is half of the knowledge. Yes? Let me ask you a question. We say, La adri nisful ilm. To say that I don't know is half of the knowledge. Husnul su'al is also half of the knowledge. So is it enough just you say I don't know and I ask good questions? What is the answer?
That's total knowledge.
Pardon?
That's total knowledge. So it should be good enough. Sometimes you might not arrive at a good answer, but if you're thinking about it.
Yes.
It's half of a half of the knowledge. So each part is, there's actually a quarter of full knowledge.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like, Sheikh, it's like marriage is half of deen. Doesn't mean that if you marry 4 wives, you're complete. Or you marry 2 wives, you're complete. Doesn't mean like that. Something like that.
You made it more complicated.
If you marry 2 times, then your deen is complete this year.
Yes.
Give half of the knowledge of the answer of the soal, the answer of the question.
Okay.
And لا أدري نصف العلم. That as well, same thing, not whole knowledge, but the knowledge about this thing about you didn't know about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are things that are very wise, but it's not that it's necessarily 50%. When we say good question is half of the knowledge, it means is the first stage of learning. Not that it is actually 50% of knowledge. It means it's the first stage. So if you want to learn, first you should ask good questions. It means that you should have good idea about what you want to gain. Or La adri nisful ilm, because if you don't know, but you think that you know, then you don't go to learn. Yeah? So the fact that you know that you don't know is a progress, is the first stage. And also, these two first half come together. It's not that it's the first half and the second half. Both of them are the early stage. Okay? So both of them relate to the first stage of learning. Okay. It's very important to have right conception of the subject. Ayatollah Mutahari says, when it comes to studying God or theology, it's very important to make sure that you have proper understanding of God before even talking about existence of God. What do you mean by God? He says, if you see some people have problem with accepting existence of God, or they have problem with the arguments for existence of God, it's because most of the time they don't even have proper conception of God. Yeah? They think of God in a way that even we may not accept. For example, they think of God as something which has time or a space. For example, God is end of the world. Yeah? So if you move on, you reach him, for example, in the space. They have different understanding of God than those who are really believers in God have. He says, God is not something in this world along other things. Never look for God among other beings. There were people who said, for example, in our laboratory, we have not found God. Or in our operation theater, we have not found God. It seems that they were looking for something which comes along with other objects. And by using a lens or microscope, you can find God. This is not God. God which is going to be seen or to be touched is not God. That God even we don't accept. Yeah? So we have to be very careful. We shouldn't look for God among other things. We should not think God is one factor among other factors or one cause among other causes. God is the cause of the causes, not one of them. If you remember, we had this discussion about why we cannot say God is one of the three. The Quran says, لَقَدْ كَفَرَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ الثَّالِثُ ثَلَاثَةٍ. Those who say God is the third of three, means one of the three. This is a problem. But the Quran itself says, مَا تَكُونُ مِن نَجْوَى ثَلَاثَةٍ إِلَّا وَهُوَ رَابِعُهُمْ وَلَا خَمْسَةٍ إِلَّا وَهُوَ سَادِسُهُمْ. No three people whisper unless God is the fourth of the three. No five people whisper unless God is the sixth of the five. So what's the difference? If you say third of the three, it's a problem. But if you say fourth of the three, it's okay. We had this discussion, I think, in Aqaid. So what's the answer? Pardon? If you say he is the third of the three, it means you are bringing him next to those two other things.
Shaykh.
Yes.
The one of three, like he is part of them, one part of those three. But the رابعهم خامسهم, it means another thing, not one part of them, but he متصور.
So you cannot bring God next to anything and then count and reach God. For example, if we are 20 people in this room, we cannot say we are 21, 20 human beings, and God, we are 21. But we can say that God is 21st of 20.
23rd,
21st of 20. In the sense that God is also present here. But not next to us. Because if we say God is next to us, the problem is that then God is not with us and within us. Yeah? You are limiting him. When you are counting, God is even in the one who is counting. Okay? So, it's very important. Never think of God as one being among other beings.
I wanted to ask you a question. In Surah Al-Kahf, it says, I'm listening to the whispering of the souls. Means He's within us. And وهو أقرب من أحبل الوريد. So it means He's everywhere.
Everywhere.
Nowhere that He's not there.
Yes. But he is everywhere, not in the sense that he occupies a space. Because he has no space, he's everywhere.
Can you explain that clearer to me?
You know, for example,
Concept.
imagine if a smoke comes. Suppose, God forbid, is fire. There is fire. Then when you enter this building, you see every room is filled with smoke. So you say a smoke is everywhere. Is God everywhere in the same sense that a smoke is everywhere in this building? No. A smoke is everywhere because it is contained by this building. But God is not everywhere in this building like a smoke. You understand?
But is He within
Therefore,
us as well?
therefore, when you have, for example, something in this room like us, as much as we are here, a smoke is not here. So the room which is emptier has more smoke. Yeah, the room which is filled with some furniture has less smoke. But God is not like this.
But is God within us as well? Because He is within us, listening to the whispering of the
Within,
souls.
not in the sense that is inside our body,
Ah, makes sense.
is everywhere. The same is with time. God is present in all times, but not in the sense that we are going through time. Yeah? So for God, there is no Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Although Friday we have God, Saturday we have God, Thursday. Every time we have God, but not in the sense that God goes through these days. Because He has time, is timeless. Okay? He's timeless. Okay, so it's very important to remember that God is not one being among many or go through limitations of time and space. He makes one example. He says, time itself is also not comparable to any particular period of time. Can you bring time next to a portion of time? Time is absolute. Time is not today or tomorrow. Yeah? Similar to that, God is absolute being, does not come next to limited beings. Okay? So you have to clarify for yourself, what do you understand by God? And make sure that you have proper understanding of God. Then he says, before Mullah Sadra, and still of course today, but before Mullah Sadra, this idea was the main idea among philosophers. And still, as I said, we believe in this. But Mullah Sadra has a kind of more mystical approach. Philosophers before Mullah Sadra, like Ibn Sina, they say God is a being which is abstract, mujarrad, has no time and no space. And God is not next to other beings. You should consider a hierarchy. God comes not at the level of other things. God comes in a hierarchical order before other things. And all beings other than God, every being other than God, depends on God. And they are poor, totally dependent on God. In their essence. Remember when we talked about poverty in existence? Salamatullah. So they are totally dependent on God. And therefore, not only in their beginning they need God, also in their continuity they need God. You remember we said God is needed for bringing into existence and for keeping in existence. It's not that God only creates us and leaves us here, then we don't need Him. We are constantly being created. Divine grace is constantly coming. Okay? So, we said God is illat muhditha and illat mubqiyah. He gives us huduth, He gives us also baqa. He brings us into existence, and also we need Him for continuing. You remember all this? Okay. But Mullah Sadra went further. Mullah Sadra says, it's not that we have two types of beings, created and creator, finite and absolute. He says, we have one real being. Everything else is like shadow of that being. They are real, but compared to each other and compared to those things that don't exist at all. But when you compare them with God, they are not real. Okay? Here, they use the example of shadow. There's a beautiful poem. Let me read for you this poem. This is mentioned by Mawlavi. Mawlavi makes the example of a bird. A bird is flying, and then the shadow is also on the ground. There is suppose a child or a person who is, he says, ablah, stupid. Someone who is not experienced, a little child, maybe 1 year, 2 year old child, doesn't understand what is shadow, or a person who is ignorant. sees the shadow of the bird and wants to catch it. And says this is moving, then goes after it. Sees he cannot reach the bird. Then even throws arrow to the shadow. But the real bird is not this shadow on the ground. The real bird is the sky. It's very beautiful. He says, مرغ بر بالا پران و سایه اش می دود بر خاک پران و مرغ وش. Morg means bird, is flying in the sky, but its shadow is running on the floor. Shadow is not flying, shadow is running. Yes, going fast. ابلهی صیاد آن سایه شود. One fool, one stupid person tries to hunt that shadow. Sayyad means hunter. میدود چندان که بیمایه شود. Runs after this shadow so much that then becomes tired. Cannot reach the shadow. بیخبر کان عکس آن مرغ بیخبر که اصل آن سایه کجاست. He doesn't know that this is not the real bird. This is an image, a shadow of the bird. تیر اندازد به سوی سایه او. He's throwing arrows towards that shadow. ترکشش خالی شود در جستجو. Then all his arrows finish. He runs out of arrows. So this is also about dunya. We go after dunya, we tire ourselves, we run out of energy and power, but we don't gain anything. Because what we wanted was not in dunya. What we wanted was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We saw his shadow on money. We went after money, but we never reached Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? We saw his shadow on power and position. We worked hard to achieve that, but we never reached end of it. So, this shows that not only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in our level, even more than that, compared to him, we are not real. We are only shadow. We are like, semi-reality. Ayatollah Mutahari mentions another example. He says, suppose there are people that from the beginning of their life, they have put in an artificial environment. They have not seen any human being, any animal, any mountain, any sea, any sun, any stars. They have always seen only films, movies. Yeah? So someone is put from the beginning into a room and there is only a screen all over. He doesn't see anything except movie. Then after, say, 5 years, 10 years, they bring him to the real world. Now he sees animals, human beings, stars, sun, sea, everything that he saw on movie. What is the relation between the two?
This world and the hereafter.
Yeah. So what's the relation?
We are seeing just like the movies here. The real thing will see the
Yes.
hereafter.
So in a sense, he has some idea. It's not that he has seen something in movies and he is seeing now something which has no relation. Yeah? No. He had some experiences. But what he had seen compared to those things in reality
Nothing.
are nothing. Now he is, perhaps confused. Although he has some idea, but this is different.
It's a beautiful, beautiful explanation.
Beautiful explanation, yeah? So, you can only realize that was not real when you see the real. But if you always have seen those movies and they tell you there is something greater, you cannot understand. Maybe you trust, that there is, but you don't understand. How can be something greater than this? Okay? Or if you have always seen mirror and you have seen the pictures in mirror and then you see the reality, it's different. So picture in mirror is not 100% unreal. There is a reality, but that reality is reflective reality. Yeah, it's not real reality. Ayatul Mutahari says the Quran uses the concept of ayah. Yeah, we have ayah and ayat, the plural form. Ayah means sign. He says maybe, of course I say maybe he doesn't say maybe, but it's better to say maybe. Maybe sign here, ayah here means the same thing. Means everything is reflecting God as shadow reflects the reality or mirror reflects. This is different from what philosophers or theologians do. Philosophers and theologians say what? They say, when we look at everything, we see it is created or contingent. It needs a creator. So by looking at them, we can realize that there is a creator. From masnu' we reach sani'. But the process is the process of reasoning, arguing. Ayatollah Mutahari says, ayah is different. Ayah is different. Ayah is like image, like a kind of presentation of something. Let me give you two examples. Suppose I see a building and I say this building needs a builder. By looking at the building, I realize that there must be a builder. Here, I don't say this building is a sign for the builder. I say this building is a way for me to argue for the existence of the builder. But if I look at the picture of the builder, that is the sign. You understand? Because picture shows, represents the one whose picture is given to you, is reflected in this picture. So Ayatollah Mutahari says, many people have thought Quran when it says there are signs for Allah, ayat for Allah, it means that by reflecting on them and thinking, you can make an argument and say this cannot come to existence unless there is a creator. But he says, for people like Mullah Sadra and mystics, Urafa, these things have a stronger relation with God. They have ability to reflect God. They are like shadow for God, or they are like pictures that you see in mirror. Okay? In any case, what is important is that the relation between Allah and beings is different from the relation that those beings have between themselves. God does not come to their level. Okay? There is a question here, very important question. Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a cause for what happens in this world, that through our scientific research we reach him, or we should reach him, or not? In other words, if we do scientific research for what happens in this world, and we can explain everything using physical, material things, can we say God then does not exist? Because in our scientific research, we didn't reach God. Some people said God, Auguste Comte had this idea that some people, they believed in God because science was not very much developed. For example, when rain comes, said God sent the rain. But when science developed, they realized that there is a procedure, there is a process. Rain is when you have a steam, and this, ascends, then you will have clouds, and then, these clouds can become very heavy and thick, and then there can be clash, there can be, electrical, process, and rain comes, for example. Now we don't need God, because we can explain everything by rules of physics and chemistry. So he said, God now, for these people, is no longer used, or no longer needed. We can thank God and say goodbye. You helped us a lot when we were not advanced in knowledge and science, but now we don't need. Na'udhu billah. He says this is false idea that even some theologians have had in the, history of Western, theology and philosophy, some religious also theology. They had this idea because they had brought God down to the level of physics and chemistry, and they were putting, religion and science in the same level. Then there was a clash. And when science became strong, there was no place left for God. But we say God is not something along other things or among other things. It's not something that you can understand it through physics and chemistry. God is something about the whole reality of the world. Therefore, God is something that through philosophy, not through science, can be understood. Yes, science can help you by giving you data and facts to develop philosophical arguments. Yeah? As we do in Burhan and Nazm, for example, argument from design. But science can never experience God. Can help you experience God. But science cannot bring God to laboratory Yes.
I think science has said already that the first thing in the world which was made was water, which is hydrogen dioxide, which is a polar molecule, and it's the best cleaning agent as they've discovered, universal cleaner. That's the first thing. And it can be used for energy. They made atom bombs from it, hydrogen bombs from it. And the next thing he created is plants. And the plants had chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is the solar cell. Solar cell was built before the creation of man. And now they're trying to build solar cells and they're saying clean energy. But God made it before.
Yes.
So there must be a creator. There's no other way. Science can also prove it.
Yeah, but this part, that this must be created by a God or by a creator who has knowledge and, intelligence, this part is philosophical. This part is not science. Yeah, because science only talks about particular things, about empirical things. So you can have a mixed argument. You take some data from science, but then philosophically reflect on it. Okay? Like argument from design. Therefore, those who know science more, they can understand existence of God better, provided that they have also that philosophical addition to their scientific knowledge. Okay? So, we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not brought into the level of science and does not come into the scientific calculations or calculus. He is above science and above scientific calculation. Otherwise, he cannot be the creator. The next discussion is about different methods for human beings to know God and to move towards God. One is the method of fitra. If you remember in Aqaid, we had also this discussion. Human beings have an innate knowledge of God, an innate yearning for God. By fitra here, we mean fitra of the heart, because we have also in logic, if you remember in mantiq, we have also some prepositions which we call them fitriyat, and those are those prepositions which are self-evident and they don't need argument. Qadaya qiyasatuha ma'aha. In logic, we had this. We are not talking about that type of fitriyat. We are talking about something that you understand by your heart. All people, no matter when and where they are located or born, they have this yearning for God and this understanding of God, which is part of their fabric. Of course, sometimes this becomes passive. If you are too busy with worldly things, this might become passive. But when you are, for example, in danger, and especially when you lose your hope in everything material or worldly, then that comes, very clearly. I don't know if you remember, I told you the story. Yes, no, other than Imam Jafar Sadiq story, I told you that when I was a teenager, so I used to take a lesson on mantiq in Tehran's bazaar. And then I had another lesson on Arabic. This is after school, I was going to take these lessons. Then I had another lesson in another place to take Arabic. So because the time was very short, so I was sitting behind someone who was riding motorcycle. And, and we were going together. And, at that time I had also lots of questions about God, and I was looking for, arguments. But when I was sitting behind him and going, I had no doubt about God. I was just praying. It was very amazing experience. So, when you are in danger, all those doubts go away. When you are relaxed and comfortable, then you say, does God exist or not? Like a child, whenever he has need, he remembers parents. When doesn't have any need, then says, do I need parents or not? Maybe I don't need parents. So, the first is through fitrah, through your heart, and this is something that we find also reflected in literature. We have beautiful, mystical and spiritual literature that talks about another voice inside us. There is another voice inside that calls us towards God, reminds us of God. For example, Hafiz says, در اندرون من خسته دل ندانم کیست. در اندرون من خسته دل ندانم کیست. I don't know who is inside my tired heart. خسته دل, it's not physical tiredness. It can be, emotionally tired, So he says, I don't know who is inside my heart. که من خموشم و او در فغان و در غوغاست. I am silent, but that thing that I don't know what is it inside me is screaming. So, we are not only this physical body. We have fitrah, and that fitrah can communicate to us, can tell us what to believe. He mentions also another poem by a person called Naziri Neishaburi. Says, بلبلان گل ز گلستان به شبستان آرید که در این کنج قفس زمزم پردازی هست. تو مپندار که این قصه به خود میگویم، گوش نزدیک لبم آر که آوازی است. He says to the birds, please bring some flowers from garden, because in the corner of this prison there is someone singing. Don't think that I am saying this story from myself. Come nearer and you would see that someone is telling me this. It's kind of communicating and inspiring. He says even modern psychologists and psychotherapists have said that there is a hidden type of perception or understanding in human beings. And that's a way to move towards God. That is the way that mystics have tried to cultivate. But there are two other ways. The second way is through science and perceptions and nature. You try to understand how this nature functions, how things are created, and then develop arguments for the existence of God. For example, argument from design. Or you say these are contingent beings and created, there must be a creator. Burhan Hudus. The third is through philosophy. And here we develop intellectual arguments, not half intellectual, half empirical. We try to develop philosophical arguments for the existence of God. The mystical approach, which is through heart, is very good. But the problem is, it's personal. An Arif can come to a very strong and very intimate relation with God. But how do you communicate these to people? Yes, if they also come the same journey like you, after 10, 20 years, they may reach this point. But if you want to quickly convince someone about existence of God, you need to have some arguments, yeah? Because they are not still mystic. So we have to use other arguments. Either we have to use as mutakallimin, as theologians have been doing, arguments from design, or for example, saying that every created thing needs a creator, or we can use philosophical arguments. Inshallah, in the next session, we will start discussing philosophical arguments for the existence of God. For example, Burhan Siddiqeen, the argument of the most truthful people, that they don't use anything for existence of God other than God himself. They don't use his creatures to come to know him. But there are different versions of Burhan Siddiqeen. Also, inshallah, we will see. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Thank you.